It is 10 a.m. on April 25th, and we are going to call this meeting of the Board of Directors of the Denton County Transportation Authority to order. I'm gonna spring this on Mr. Jaworski. Would you mind running us with the invocation, sir?
Sure. Please join me in prayer. Lord, thank you for bringing us together today to make decisions that will enhance the lives of our residents in each of our respective communities and throughout the county. Just ask that you provide each of us the guidance and wisdom to make those wise decisions, and to always remember that we're working for the people first and for anything else second. And all these things we ask in your prayer and in your name, amen.
Amen. You join me in the pledges to our flags.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, God, one indivisible.
I'm going to hand this over to staff for introductions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have several new staff members to introduce today. I'll first call Ms. Sherelle Evans-Jones to the podium to introduce the new member of the Finance and Procurement team.
Good morning, Sherelle Evans-Jones, Chief Financial Officer. Pleased to be here with you this morning to introduce another member of our finance team. I'd like to call forward Mr. Joseph, or Joey as we like to call him, Joseph Sikowski. He is our new procurement coordinator. He comes to us from a variety of different experiences. One of those highlights something that I think is great about your addition to our team. One of his more recent roles was with the city of Santa Clarita. And you might remember in a previous Santa Clarita, California, and you might remember in a previous introduction that I did, I introduced our Joseph Oram, our Senior Manager of Procurement and Contracts, as also having a background with the city of Santa Clarita. So this is one of those things where great people come into this organization, like and love what they do enough to bring other great people into the organization. So we're so pleased to have Joey be a part of our team. He is, a few things about him, he is a San Francisco Giants fan, but converting to be a Rangers fan. This is what he tells me. And he is a United States Coast Guard veteran. So we're so pleased to have you be a part of our team. Welcome to DCTA.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next to Mr. Kevin Thompson, our Senior Manager of Mobility Services.
Good morning, Board and Chair. I'm pleased to introduce to you today Randy Trantham, who comes to us from the city of Denton, where she served for over 18 years. She has worked her way up from animal services all the way until HR. She's taken over our customer service department, and we're excited about what the future has to hold for her. So thank you guys very much.
Mr. Austin Frith.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. It is, for those of you that are NFL fans, it is draft day. And I feel like we've scored 2 number 1 draft picks in these 2 candidates for the planning and development department. So the first individual I'd like to introduce is Karina Maldonado. Karina has over 12 years of experience in regional transportation and land use planning focused on transit and active transportation. She rises to DCTA from the city of Denton, where she served as principal transportation planner in the Transportation Services Division, leading transportation planning efforts, regional and state coordination with project and development reviews for over 300 active development projects. Prior to joining the city of Denton, she was employed with the North Central Texas Council of Governments as a senior transportation planner, where she managed federal funding, compliance, and oversight for paratransit and transit operations. So please welcome Karina to our awesome team. And then the next draft pick is Mr. Todd Plesko. Todd he comes to us from AECom. He's got 4 decades of experience in planning, scheduling, and operations with 4 small, medium, and large transit agencies. Since 2009, Todd has been acting as the Vice President of Planning and Scheduling for DART. In that role, he led all bus planning and scheduling, rail scheduling, and microtransit planning. High visibility project was the successful implementation of DART's 2022 bus network restructuring, resulting in nearly 75 bus routes, including over 20 high-frequency routes. Comes to us with a wealth of knowledge. We're excited to have just his presence with us. He's going to bring a lot to the table, and we're excited.
Yeah. Thank you. And last but not least, Ms. Jackie Bronson.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I am super excited to introduce Ashlyn Quast to you guys. She is our new HR technician. She is a recent Texas A&M grad with her Bachelor's of Science in Human Resources Development. And she also just completed 2 amazing, well-rounded HR internships. So we are excited for all the things she's going to bring to the HR team. And currently, she also doubles as your friendly face at the front. So she'll be welcoming you every time you join us. Welcome.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes the introductions, and it would be remiss to not say thank you to this board for fulfilling the needs of staffing that we identified through the budget process. And those introductions and the others you've seen in the last few months represent the full court press, or are the product of full court press that we've had since the beginning of the year to fill out our staffing plan. So thank you all, and we look forward to the additions of all our team members.
Next up on the agenda is a public comment. Provides an opportunity for citizens to address the DCTA Board of Directors on any agenda items or other matters related to DCTA. Each speaker will be given a total of 3 minutes to address any items. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, standing a beat, list of yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. Citizens that are not able to participate in person can email, and that has to be no later than the day before the meeting to ensure comment will be distributed to board members. Do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
Moving on, consent agenda. That will work too. Moving on, there is no public comment. We are going to move to consent agenda. Board, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Regular agenda, item 1, discuss the update on the Intermediate Service Plan, ISP.
Good morning again. So we're going to dive into the current update on where we're at with the Intermediate Service Plan. All right, as you recall, we had raised 3 decisions last month to be made and for the board to think about. Based on initial feedback, what we've done is we proceeded with our analysis with essentially removing Go Zone from the 3, 6, and 7 travel shed and making additional investments in bus frequency, which would then trigger us to relocate that capacity. So the 3 decisions on the right are what we talked about last month, and we'll proceed with the assumption that we're going to move forward with those. As a recap, the update this month will align with our phase 1 of ISP. Our plan remains intact, with the focus being on the relocation of microtransit away from that 3, 6, 7 Connect travel shed. We developed a 3-step approach to executing phase 1 of the ISP. As you can see, step 1 focuses on the increase of the frequency of the 3, 6, and 7. Step 2 is the implementation of phase 1 of our bus stop implementation plan. And then step 3 is that relocation of that capacity within that buffer zone. Each of these steps includes extensive coordination and communication elements with our operators, vendors, member cities, and riders. As a recap and an update, we continue to see seat unavailability get better in March, but overall we still see challenges in capacity and wait times from a year-over-year comparison. One of our goals for this first phase of the ISP is to support the capacity constraints we're seeing in Louisville and Highland Village. On the other hand, we continue to see solid performance on our fixed route, as you see on the graph on the far right. This slide shows an overview of the gradual increase in Louisville and the leveling off of completed trips. This, we think, is due to the capacity constraints in Louisville and is why our increased focus is on active management of this service. When we look at Highland Village, we see an interesting data set here. Overall ride requests have grown 35% from March of 23 to March of this year. Within that same time frame, we are only seeing an 8% increase in trips being completed. We make the hypothesis that due to seat unavailability, at peak times, the ride requests start to go down due to the consistent capacity restriction. But we feel that there's a great potential for ridership growth here as we see increased capacity. As a brief recap, we shared with the board last month. Our data has provided us two following metrics when we look at 3, 6, and 7 routes. We see the 10% of overall Denton trips happening within a quarter mile of the 3, 6, and 7 routes. When we combine that with the data showing GO Zone demand year over year, this formulates the conclusion of an opportunity to provide consistent year-round service on a single mode, that being Connect. As another recap, we shared this comparison from the overall trip time standpoint. As you can see here, fixed route is extremely competitive, even with the transfer included in the equation. When comparing the time points, 20-minute frequency becomes a key element in this solution and route competitiveness. Again, another recap. This is the GO Zone. This is the GO Zone integration user interface that will be a key element as we continue on this first phase of the ISP. And we continue to work with VIA on making sure that we have a seamless transition for the rider and communicate clearly through all necessary channels the enhancements that we are making to their journey. At this time, we're going to transition to the analysis the finance team completed related to our cost per hour calculation. And with that, I will hand it over to Lavelle Evans-Jones.
Thank you, Austin. Okay, so I have a few slides for you, and what I wanted to first start by just kind of giving you a visual of is this is the slide that we ended whenever Accenture did the work before. I think what they were doing is comparing kind of a period from October 2021 through February 2022, so a partial year, and they were comparing certain things to come up with a revenue cost per hour. What I'm giving you just a visual of, it's almost like when I was a kid and I would do a bunch of work and I would come home and show my mom my book report. So I just want you to see that there is a memorandum that we did a ton of work, page 1 of 15, that backs up all of the details. It's basically meant to memorialize our methodology for how we went about our work this year, you know, in terms of calculating that, to make it be something that is more easily duplicated amongst our other staff members and other team members. And it's also something that through the years, as we continue to pick this up, we may learn or glean additional information to be able to challenge those assumptions in different ways. But I wanted you to understand those two pieces. Now, we're going to start at direct costs and work our way clockwise. These are the key components that make up this calculation. You start with direct cost, and that is direct cost for Connect, UNT Shuttle, and GO Zone. Each of these things within our accounting software is maintained in its own organization code. So I can go and grab the direct cost for each one of those items. But that's not the only thing that makes up the cost for these particular services. As you kind of move your way around, we also work through, and there's organization codes that capture the administrative cost, bus administrative cost. And what we did with those costs is work through and kind of divided those amongst the two bus-related services. So bus administrative costs is not going to go to GO Zone. It will remain within the Connect and the UNT Shuttle. what you see in that note, these costs were shared at a 70-30 split. And that is based on the specifics that we have in terms of the revenue hours that and how they were split amongst those two pieces of service. Okay. Kind of moving on around the circle. That's not the end of how much it costs to provide these services. Then we look to our general administrative cost, and we kind of did an analysis of everything that is in those costs, of the proportionate share of time and other expenses that are captured that can be attributable to the relative services that we're capturing costs for. Just to give you an idea of scope, we didn't seek to put the entire G&A on these, because we do rail, we do other things, right? And there should be some amount of G&A that retains within the organization. So just to give you an idea of scope, about 35% of the total G&A cost is what is being shared amongst these service lines that we're calculating. So these first three are how you come up with the core cost, the base level cost of how much it costs per revenue hour or per vehicle mile, et cetera, to provide those services. But then there becomes a question as we're working through with our teams of it's not a cost of adding a brand new service, okay? But what if you have an existing service and you want to add another vehicle to it? It's not going to add a whole nother customer service team. It's not going to add a whole, some of these costs that are in here. So you have to do some analysis to figure out what unduplicated costs get pulled out if you are considering the marginal cost of adding something, adding a service line, adding additional bus on a route that's already functioning. Does that make sense? Okay. So with all of those components, what we work through is within each one of these organization codes and the methods that I've explained in the previous slide, we went through and pulled what were direct costs, and you can see those scheduled out. GoZone tends to be, because of its service, is more of a turnkey operation. I mean, we have to put some general administrative time and attention to it, but it tends to be more turnkey. As I stated before, the bus administrative cost is not being shared amongst the GoZone service. And you can kind of see us work through. One other thing that's interesting to note or important to note is I talked about that 70-30 split of our total bus admin costs, and that's kind of what you see in the $3.3 million number for UNT Shuttle versus the $1.4 million for Connect. Lastly, we went through each one of these general and administrative costs and like by division unit, like this is about 5% of time. This is about, this department puts this amount of, these are expenses that are more directly attributed to these bus service, et cetera. We went through each one of those line items that make up our general administrative costs to ascribe some portion of these costs out. So in total, these three items make up about $2 million of an overall $5.9 million or $6 million actual, to kind of give you an idea of scope, and that we did retain some of those costs because, again, we're talking about bus and GoZone service and not some of our other service lines that we offer. One last thing that I wanted to point out here is that from here forward, so when I go to the next slide, I am going to begin to talk about bus service in total. So we're going to take that number, which is the combination of those two, and we're going to go forward when you're ready. Are we ready? Okay. Bam, there it is. I love it when a slide works out. Okay. Now remember my fourth, when we were working clockwise, now I'm bringing in the concept of those unduplicated costs and stripping some of those out, because ultimately what we're trying to do is figure out the base cost of service per service hour and per revenue hour. And we're trying to figure out the marginal cost, the cost of adding a bus service to something that's already functioning. So these unduplicated costs that are being pulled out have to do with, like, for instance, this is a cost that we bear relative to customer service. And we recognize that customer service would get vastly bigger if you add a whole new service line, a whole new, something that's going to bring in something altogether different. But adding one more bus to an existing service is not going to change our customer service approach. The thought process here is that we seek to remove similar types of costs. We would not, in carrying out the bus service and adding additional buses, there are costs that are going to continue, such as fuel, tires, the certain maintenance, but that might not mean that we need to hire a whole new maintenance team, to service an additional line. So the theory behind how we came up with the removal of certain unduplicated costs is as I described. Ultimately, we come down to a $4.9 million marginal cost for bus and a $9.7 million marginal cost for GoZone. These details in terms of our service cost per hour become relevant on the next slide, but I wanted to kind of distinguish this is money and this is not money. I put green things around things that are money. So, okay, so those service hours came forward from the previous page, as did the marginal cost. And so what you see happening here is us doing some calculations to figure out for bus, the cost per hour and the marginal cost per service hour and the marginal cost per revenue hour as calculated there, as well as on the GoZone cost, you see similar mathematics. I like to try to show my work as much as possible with my A minus Bs and et cetera. So you can kind of see that ultimately on a revenue cost per hour, GoZone breaks down to about $50.24, and on a revenue cost per hour, the bus breaks down to $86.53, I think is the number that goes forward in a number of your calculations. We wanted to spend some time because this is critical to the other things that we begin to build on in this presentation. So I wanted to explain a little bit of the thought process and the rationale without taking you through the 15-page document and those details. May I answer any questions for you before Austin rejoins the communication and takes us further? Okay, thank you. Sure.
All this non-duplicated cost, I can see where you've got another bus or another truck or something of that nature. In some of these cases, some of the things that we do require extra training to add a personnel, in that the handy rides in particular, there's a whole different set of training for the bus driver provider than it is for regular run-of-the-mill bus. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, are those calculated in for things like that as well?
The question was, is the training costs related to us carrying out our paratransit services, are those factored in? They remain a part of the total cost, okay, and they are not removed as an unduplicated cost.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question.
Terrell, I had a question or clarification. I think I know the answer, but I just wanted to make sure. On this slide under mm-hmm. the GoZone, where it says, the first line says total cost of UNT shuttle service. Is that a typo?
It is very much a typo.
Okay.
It is extremely typo, and I apologize for that.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that for anyone who may be watching.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. You're up.
Okay, we're going to dive into some more numbers here in a minute. So our current schedule, as you see up here, shows a variety of frequency based on route and time of day. So as we start to calculate this cost comparison of fixed route versus microtransit, it's important to keep in mind the following factors. Increased frequency impacts number of buses, and number of buses impacts overall cost per passenger on the mode. And as you see here, our current schedule flexes from 5 to 4 buses during midday, and then back to 5 in the early evening hours. On the upcoming slides, we'll dive into the details of how these elements play into the mode comparisons. Okay, now we get into the fun stuff. So when we look at a midday, we wanted to start with the comparison. The top left graph is what we had shared with you all last month. That is the FY23 average weekday passengers per network hour. And in the midday time, we were seeing around a 35.7 number. When we did that same calculation for this fiscal year, starting in October through today, we got an increase of about 43.1 passengers. So based on the methodology we have formulated in the previous slides on cost per hour of operation, we start to pull into the equation the overall comparison of cost per passenger on GoZone and Connect. We also look at the impact of increasing frequency or the number of buses how that affects the overall cost per passenger number. As you will see on the graph on the right, during midday at 43 passengers per hour, which we are currently seeing, the cost to operate the existing 4-bus Connect network is less than operating cost of GoZone today. When we increase the frequency to 6 buses, you'll see that on the dashed blue line. That gap starts to become smaller between GoZone and Connect, but we still see it being favorable from a cost perspective. Keep in mind that that dashed line does signify a 6-bus network, does not show any growth, so we can assume this is a worst case scenario. So as we increase the frequency, we suspect we'll see better ridership, which means that that line will move further down and to the right as we move forward. So that was midday. This is morning and evening. We did the same comparison on this graph. And then similar analysis. If you notice, historically, the morning time favors GoZone, being more cost effective. But as we grow passengers on the network, that gap we feel will continue to get smaller. The evening ridership favors Connect today and will continue to favor Connect as we grow that ridership. Does this make sense? Do we need to review anything on these? I know it's a lot of information.
Can you explain what's the dash line again? And
so the dash line on both graphs is where we're headed with increased frequency with a 6-bus network. The solid line is the existing today for midday it's 4 buses, for morning and evening it's 5 buses. All right, so we will move on with overall schedule alternatives and those associated costs. Each of these cost estimates were based on the projected annual service hours multiplied by the cost per service hour of 82.33, as seen on the previous cost slides that were displayed. So based on strategy goals we reviewed on the previous slide, we explored benefits of option 1. So option 1 is this idea of a 20-minute frequency for all the Connect service network. We feel that this provides the best rider connectivity, including guaranteed bus-to-bus transfers at the downtown transit center and easier transfers between 6 and 7 at Discovery Park. This option moves DCTA toward having a system of interconnected and coordinated schedules, which reduces travel time, wait time, and offers options to serve more jobs. Option 1 also provides frequency on Connect 3 and Connect 6 during midday, which we're seeing nationwide ridership has grown, and then also provides excellent connectivity to A-train arrivals and departures from the DDTC. This again offers the highest ridership growth potential because we see increased job access in Denton for nearly all shifts between 7:30 a.m. and 8:30 p.m. Option 2, this strategy we reviewed is essentially the same as the previous slide, except beginning at 7 p.m., we start to curtail that service down to a 40-minute frequency. This saves a little bit of money, about $100,000. It's a hybrid option of option 1. And we would, again, cut that frequency after 7 p.m. But that would eliminate some of the efficient connections for the afternoon peak A-train trips and for students traveling back to the Dallas area. It also eliminates efficient connections for many people working those peak hours for part-time jobs after 7 p.m. And our final option 3, this is more of a peak period option where we explored a more consistent schedule than we have today, but still having a 40-minute frequency in that midday timeframe. We feel that this will slow down trips that require transfer confusing riders, creating less than desirable connection times. We don't offer that improved frequency during the midday, where we're seeing an increased overall nationwide growth in midday travel. So this, in our opinion, is the least favorable solution, but it does provide that cost savings. So as we move into step 2 of our ISP, we start to talk about bus infrastructure and the fact that we're proposing to increase frequency, installing new bus stops, and then reallocating that GO Zone service. So this is just a reminder slide about the implementation that was presented back in November board. This bus stop study that we did provided 18 new stops along 3, 6, and 7. So we'll dive into where we're at with that process. So today we're finalizing the exact locations where these bus stops are going to go. We're working diligently to get actually a stake in the ground to make sure we've got we add life to the dots on the map that you see in the bottom right-hand corner. And we're making sure that we're considering flow of traffic, sight lines, right-of-way availability, sidewalk alignments, and any utility challenges that may happen. So that's the work that's being done as we speak, and more to come on that.
Austin, real quick, if I could just add, we are considering it at this point to make this implementation, if you all choose to go this direction. These bus stops would initially be signs in the ground. We have the future plan to identify which of those are higher level stops that require additional infrastructure. But the signs in the ground are the things that we can do most expediently to make the change as quickly as possible if you all decide to do that.
Thank you. So when we talk about step 3 of our ISP, this is that reallocation of the GO Zone travel shed from 3, 6, and 7 to a potential another area within our member cities. The heat map on your left, sorry, wrong slide. The heat map on your left shows a data set from FY24 to date, showcasing the highest concentration of seat unavailability in Louisville. We've identified the top 5 locations that we're seeing here as some food for thought. The top right graph showcases Louisville GO Zone trips, and then by hour, and then the bottom graph shows seat unavailability by hour from the same time frame. So as you can see, the peak demand remains in the morning and early evening hours for Louisville, and even though demand is solid from 9 a.m. to noon, seat unavailability is lowest in those hours. So this is kind of the initial analysis that we did from our data sets. And these are the areas that we feel would probably be the first to look at as far as relocating some service hours. We did the same exercise for Highland Village. And when we look at Highland Village, this is kind of a known factor here. We see the key areas aligned with the 407 Justin Road area. Peak demand for GO Zone is between 1 and 5 p.m., coinciding with the hours that have the highest seat availability. So again, these would be the areas that we'd be focused in on within Highland Village. And then when we look at future opportunities, as we look at maybe GO Zone moving other areas within the city of Denton, One of the areas we're looking at is Robeson Ranch. Again, this is an active adult community that has quite a bit of residents in that area and currently not served by any DCTA service, but at some point may present an opportunity for transit to come to this area. As you can see, we've identified the top O&D where people from Robeson Ranch are headed within that time frame. A lot of those individuals are going to the Razor Ranch area and Denton Town Crossing. Another area within Denton we looked at was the Denton Enterprise Airport. There continues to be a high level of growth here, especially in the industrial warehousing area. And we feel that this is another opportunity for workforce transit in Denton. And then finally, we looked at the areas within East Denton. We've got some information from the city of Denton regarding residential growth on this side. Currently, there is on the bottom right-hand side, there is some residential going in that is not supported by GoZone or Connect service. So opportunities into the future where those developments become hotspots, we could look at areas that we could reallocate service. So path forward. We're going to finalize the bus stop plan, coordinating closely with the city of Denton. We're dividing the cost savings and allocation options with GoZone and our partners at VIA. Our plan is to come back with you in May with a board action for approval of a preferred option for the first phase of this ISP. We plan to finalize schedules and rostering options and training beginning in June. And then bus stops being installed by the August timeframe and a tentative service start date of August 18th. A key note here, we don't lose sight of this, is the bus operator recruiting. This is an ongoing thing that we're focusing a lot of efforts on, and we'll continue to ensure that we have the operators in place to run the service. And that is the update for ISP. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question. Okay, so we're going to talk about options on the GoZone capacity reallocation today. And I'm not seeing in here when would that, if we discuss those options and we make a decision, when does that go into effect?
I think we would foresee that going into effect at a similar time frame as the August timeframe. So it's a three-step process, but all these things are working concurrently. So whenever we increase service on Connect, the bus stops are installed, then we would start to reallocate some of that service. And we've been working with VIA. We had a call with them yesterday, and they said it's, to do that switch, it's about an 8-week process, but they're already understanding where we're headed with this, so they're on board.
Okay, and I guess the reason that I ask is because on slide 14, at least in my presentation, I think it might be, I've got the draft presentation, the one that shows the seat unavailable by zone.
It's way at the beginning.
Way at the beginning, okay.
Yeah, it's way at the beginning. It's before Sherelle's presentation.
Here?
One more, maybe? Yeah.
There. Okay.
So the reason I ask is because it looks like, over the last, since November, there appears to be a growing disparity between the Highland Village, Louisville zone and the Denton zone as far as seat unavailability goes. And I'm just curious if there's a way for us to, we know this is an issue. Is there a way for us to address it in a more timely manner? Especially considering that the GoZone is really the only ground transportation that Louisville and Highland Village have. Is there a way that we can address it earlier than August?
I'll take that. So we have already begun to actively manage the capacity, and that's what's allowed the gap to begin narrowing, although it's not where it needs to be. We have not reached the point where that active management has started to degrade the KPIs in Denton to the point that it's no longer meeting the KPIs. But I would expect that in April you'll see the gap narrow a little bit further. The board, we could remove that capacity or begin shifting that capacity more aggressively in the summertime. The challenge is, though, the risk of tripping the KPIs and not meeting the service requirements in Denton. One of the things that's come up in our conversations with VIA is that they don't have a corollary for this type of action anywhere else on the network. So we don't understand what the adoption rate is going to be of people who are taking GoZone and moving to the fixed route, or if they'll just leave the network altogether. I'm not concerned about losing rides because I believe that when we shift the capacity or when we increase frequency, number one, the bus is going to be a very attractive alternative for folks. And so that's going to be really helpful. And then the capacity that we move for GoZone, if the board makes the choice to move that down to Louisville Highland Village, I think what we see is the demand is there to absorb it. So net, our overall ridership is not going to change. I'd like to see what happens with our number in April to see how much more we're able to narrow that gap. And that then if the board provides direction to say we want to move this faster, then we just need to be able to inform you of what the potential impacts would be. Ultimately, we want to keep a quality of service across the whole system that meets the expectations that we've set. And so I'm sensitive to the gap, like you said, but also sensitive to trying to maintain the performance level across the whole system. But does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And the presentation that I've been looking at was the draft and it didn't have March.
Right.
So I appreciate that came down. It is concerning that I realize that our KPI for seat unavailability is 17.5%, and that we're all below that. But I still think where we're at with the seat unavailability in Louisville and Highland Village, where there's not an option to take a bus instead, it's really high.
Yes, ma'am. Yep, I understood. And what we talked about last time was beginning in November was the first time we really began to see the disparity because we had been tracking the KPIs and they were working consistently across the zones. What we saw come this current fiscal year is different because demand is increasing all over the system. And so, like I said, let us continue to monitor for the month of April and come back and see what this number looks like in April, and then provide options in the May meeting that if the board would like options on how to move more aggressively, we can provide those along with the caveats of what the potential impacts might be for service overall.
So are we comfortable saying that this is specifically more demand requests in Louisville Highland Village than demand requests as a proportion in Denton? Or do we think that there's something else that made that change happen in November?
What I can say definitively, if you go to the next slide, what we can say definitively here is that ride requests in Louisville have increased significantly year over year. From 2023 February at 22,500, that's not a good comparison because it's a short month and we had some ice days. 27,600 though in March versus 31,966 in this March. That's about a 15% increase. And so that is demand growth. And then looking at Highland Village, if you go to the next slide, same thing. You see those green bars continuing to get higher. We see what we know about ridership in Denton is bus ridership continues to increase, and the Denton GoZone service has pretty much stayed the same. And so we don't have the same look readily available for the Denton zone, but we just see that system operating consistently. One of the pieces of feedback we got from VIA was that if they have in their system, they defaulted or began defaulting towards meeting demand in Denton. That's where we came in and said, no, we need to balance these two zones. And that's where we've been able to make steps to close the gap. And so as we do that more aggressively, we'll see I think the KPIs in Denton degrade commensurately with that action.
Would, and I don't know, this is not a question, it's more conjecture. Do we maybe see this as
an induced demand kind of situation where, okay, we've built some new lanes on the freeway. And so travel times have, gone down, and now people are like, oh, well, we're hitting a limit. So I'll go back to using the bus because I know that's a little more reliable, right? So we're seeing maybe we're seeing, because of the two modalities, we're seeing that leveling of where which roads they use. Are they using all the little neighborhood cut throughs, or are they using the big freeway?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that'd be an interesting thing to study if there's ever time or effort, and maybe to talk with VIA about how that data maybe can pull that information. Cause I think there's a parallel to how we build lanes and freeways.
Yeah.
Or if you say that, certainly the demand, it's clear demand on the buses in Denton have increased, which you could argue freed up GO zone capacity that has been absorbed by new riders.
Yeah.
Yep. I think going back to the comprehensive operations analysis in the spring of 2022, the microtransit availability drives demand. And so the most important thing we can continue to do is leverage this methodology to figure out how we get people to fixed route where the economics make sense. So this is step one of what I expect will be a few different steps that could happen in pretty rapid succession. And we'll talk about those a little bit more in the May board meeting as well. One last thing I'll say here is ridership through March of this year is at 1.8 million rides. Halfway through the fiscal year, we're at 1.8 million. Best ever ridership at DCTA is about 3.1 million. If we don't have any more month-over-month growth between now and the end of the fiscal year, we will be near best ever performance. And I expect there is going to be month-to-month growth. And so the paradigm through which we think about DCTA and our network and the demand for our services, I think this is shifting as we go into record territory potentially, which is a good problem to have.
Any other questions or comments on the intermediate service plan? I think the only thing was, for me, was we've got cost numbers on the bus side, but didn't see those cost numbers come back on the GO zone side. I think we did see them last meeting. So when we get back to the ISP, and I'm sure you guys will do it, and we just make sure that we have that full visibility of cost and cost movement. Because what I'd hate to get lost in the story here is there is an option in Denton for 0 seat unavailability. Connect, right? I mean, that has 0 unavailability. It's infinite is how I look at it. And they have an option with seat unavailability with GO zone. The southern half of our partners do not have a 0 seat option for cost reasons and other reasons. So, but that will make me kind of feel, or at least see about pushing and balancing that load. And if that means separate KPIs, then so be it. But I think that's because 2 modalities versus 1 make me want to see what I can do to make sure that there's equity there and not just equality.
Yeah, and that is a pretty straightforward calculation of what is the productivity number in Denton on an hourly basis for a GO zone vehicle versus the number of rides that we're thinking about taking off the service. You can multiply that times an hourly rate and provide that. It doesn't come across actually as a savings, though, if you reallocate that capacity, but you can compare it's $500,000 in bus frequency versus $600 and some odd thousand in GO zone capacity. The feedback from VIA on that has been, well, we do not understand who's going to adopt the bus versus not. And so it's a bit fuzzy, but we can certainly provide you the arithmetical calculation of what the GO zone capacity offset is.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other discussion on item 1? All right. With that being said, we will move on to item 2, discuss update on the Old Town Louisville transit-oriented development.
Okay. So, Old Town. So we're currently looking forward as far as what are we doing with Old Town and where are our next steps. I've listed up here some considerations that we're looking at. And those include development of a TOD policy. We're not going to have this fully hashed out for when we start to kick off Old Town, but we're going to work towards the key elements of that policy being in place. We also are finalizing our admin building and space layout requirements. Essentially, everything you see here replicated in an admin building. So we're working on that, and then we're refining the overall program of what Old Town could be. So in that refinement discussion, we're looking at a refinement of the conceptual vision, looking at the current market, outlining our deal structure, and finalization of the RFQ strategy and timeline. So these are all considerations that we're in the thick of right now as an update. So when we look at Old Town TOD program, we really wanted to touch on this desire to create a TOD working group. And this group would essentially ensure the guiding principles and policies of the TOD are fully integrated in the program. This would consist of a representation from DCTA and its member cities, and will essentially provide recommendations and considerations to the board on items related to TOD. Some of the guiding principles, as you'll see here, are focused on maintaining cooperative relationships with the member cities, establishing clear roles and responsibilities. I know we've touched on that at the January offsite. That's a key element here. Expanding opportunities, enhancing identity, promoting livability, walkability, and connection to the overall community, all while encouraging transit. So next steps for project development. As we move forward, our plan is to conduct a design workshop with this working group to discuss site plan and overall program requirements. In June, we're looking at the refinement of those site plan concepts, develop this revised site plan, and then following that, that would support a non-prescriptive vision that would be included in upcoming RFQ. And then in July, at some time, we would be finalizing that RFQ and developing that draft. So that's where Old Town Louisville is currently at. We have answer any questions or comments.
And I think we are looking for feedback from the board on the identification of members who would be in the working group. If we would ideally, the working group rather than a committee, to stop short of a quorum of board members, and then we would have staff assigned as well, and folks from the city of Louisville staff that would be part of the working group.
Well, I think from a board perspective, having one seat from the county makes sense. And then having, of course, I think Louisville needs to have a say on that, just as I look at that. I don't know if Judge East would have the time or the inclination to be involved, but
As I said, a workshop I'd be interested in serving.
and then I think absolutely somebody from our marketing department, our economic development department, and our planning departments from Louisville, I think would make sense. Board, any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, then we'll look to have an action on board selection next time, and
okay,
myself and Judge each as the short list on that, if you can.
So I'll just read back. Chair Gilmore, Secretary Eads, a representative from Louisville Economic Development, and
Louisville Planning.
Louisville Planning. Okay. Thank you.
Item 3, update on solicitation for on-call architectural engineering and planning services for DCTA.
Right. Good morning for the third and final time, I think. This is going to provide you, the board a briefing on where we're at with our existing contracts within planning and development and where we're headed. So we'd like to share a quick overview of contracts and the strategy as we move forward. We look at our current and future needs for contracts. So today, DCTA has 2 on-call professional services contracts, one focused on typical architecture and engineering services and one focused on rail engineering supporting all things A-Train. DCTA also has 2 similar in nature transit and transportation planning services contracts. All these contracts are task order based and are utilized on an as needed basis to support DCTA board staff. And you can see when they were awarded and when they expire. So we've got some that are coming up this year. So as we look at our strategy to simplify and consolidate these contracts, we took a look at our current and future needs from a planning and development standpoint. Some of the key requirements include general architecture and engineering professional services, simulations and modeling, intermediate and long-range service planning and design, project and program management, and larger project design and construction oversight. So with these needs, we looked at essentially what we have ahead of us as far as projects and programs. So we've aligned our current and future needs with the current and future projects. As you see, there's a wide range of projects here, from our current ISP with service design and planning to the long-range service plan and future outputs that may come out of the Regional Transit 2.0 integration initiative. So based on the forecasted work ahead of us and our past experiences, we propose a plan of 3 contracts to support planning and development here at DCTA. One of the contracts would be supporting general architecture and engineering needs. Some examples of those projects that we would have used for this type of contract would include the JROF design, any drainage and studies, recommendation, asset recommendations, facility space design, and bus stop infrastructure implementation. Those types of projects would fall under that on-call A&E service contract. Second contract we would solicit would be for program management for the A-Train. We briefly touched on this last month, but this would provide an on-call task order-based contract to support all elements for the A-Train program moving forward, including FTA and FRA coordination, grant submittal support, modeling, simulations, preliminary design, and any owner's rep support that may be required as part of the program. The full scope of elements that were briefed at the March board meeting. The final contract we would look is at an on-call task order-based contract for transit planning and services. This would be a holistic contract that would engage and provide support for the remaining elements of the ISP while concurrently working on the long-range service plan. We feel that this provides us an integrated team that is working on both the ISP and the long-term service plan. This consultant would also support any day-to-day needs that would be able to adjust our current plans based on any changes or disruptors that may present themselves in the transit world in which we operate in. We've outlined several benefits that we think this approach would include, including larger contract solicitations, developing more buzz around the market, consistency from a team perspective, efficiency, and core focus on the path forward. So that's our recommendation. And then our next steps includes an immediate focus on the program management contract. That's kind of our immediate need, is that to move forward the A-Train program. We anticipate award in late fall of this year for that solicitation. Concurrently, we'll be working on the development of new scopes for the professional services and planning contracts. We envision a contract extension on the current on-call planning contracts to allow for appropriate transition time between the two. That is our briefing.
Board, any questions, comments, concerns?
Sure. Austin, about how long would the contracts be? What are you thinking would be the period of time?
I think the current ones, I believe, are 3-year. Let's see here. I guess they're 3-year with 2-year options, I think, is the current one. So I think
something like that,
something similar to that seems to be working. And the A-Train or the rail engineering one, we want to make sure that is long enough to support that program, because it may take some time.
I think one thing I want to highlight, you see the age of the on-call architect engineer and the age of the on-call railroad contract. we would need to ensure good overlap between LAN and the new rail program management consultant. If LAN is not, if LAN chooses to resubmit and is not selected. And so if that is the case, then we would want to make sure that we extend LAN for a number of months in order to provide that overlap between consultants. But we recognize the need to refresh this procurement because of the age of those agreements.
Would that require board action?
Yes, sir, it would.
Sorry, I missed this. Can you tell me the difference between AECOM's contract and Kittleson's contract?
So right now, the scopes are very similar from what I recall. Right now, we're using AECOM for planning level scopes, similar to the bus stop study where they're actually here and boots on the ground. Kittleson is based out of, I believe, Chicago. So there's some just logistics challenges with having a contract that's based out of Chicago and having to locate people down here to work on day-to-day stuff. So that's the main difference I'm seeing, how we're using the two contracts. Kittleson is more long-range, long-term planning. AECOM is the day-to-day support.
Thanks.
One last question, Austin. Would you envision selecting a contractor or like a pool of 2 or 3 contractors for each service?
I think initially we were looking at one major contractor with appropriate sub-consultants.
With a team.
Yeah, right. The appropriate.
And that was kind of my question as well. Are we looking at pre-qualifying A&E or pre-qualified firms so that you're not just really putting all of your eggs in that one basket because of the capacity of that one firm to do the jobs that you're asking them to do? You're pre-qualifying these firms, whether they're small or large jobs. Maybe other firms can meet better needs for small projects than stuck with one firm for 5 years.
Yeah, I think we would explore that opportunity. I think we're definitely going to work closely with our procurement team to make sure that the right team is organized and we're not excluding anybody that may be a good fit.
The balance that we've talked about is providing a contract opportunity that's attractive to the right team of the right size that entices people to submit, because the volume of our work, some people might look at it and say there's not enough work there to support two multidisciplinary teams. And so that's what we're trying to balance through. And I think we can write this procurement in such a way that we give ourselves some of that flexibility, but ultimately we want strong teams with significant capabilities, and we're concerned about dilution of the work that might prevent people from submitting if they see us as not a huge opportunity.
Yeah, and I fully understand that. I guess I would be looking at it as something in the scope to prevent a capacity issue with the firm that you chose to delay projects because of their staffing issues or capacity that they can't provide the service, or that the timelines are always 18 months.
Right.
On everything, So.
Yeah, understood.
All right. I don't hear any other conversation on that one. Let's go ahead and move on to item 4, update on mobility as a service contracts. You sure you don't want to stay up there?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I get the honor of being able to discuss with you some updates on our mobility as a service contracts. This is merely a discussion, but our contracts right now are focused around 3 main areas. We've got transit network companies, which is 1727, then 1703 on-demand transit, and then 1905, which is mobility as a service, but otherwise known as our GoZone services. Now, the item that's highlighted there in red is our on-demand services currently being provided by Lyft for the Trinity Metro Alliance Zip Zone service. As I shared with you last month, that service is set to expire in June. So we've highlighted it there that this is just one of 10 items that are looked to expire at the end of this fiscal year, but that one itself is going to be expiring in June. Now, all of these contracts themselves, it's a little convoluted. We took an opportunity to dive into this and better understand why, but also to get the opportunity to improve upon them. The contract started back in 2017 with the on-demand services with 1703. And that piece there involved Irving Holdings as well as Via and Lyft. And then it transitioned over to the on-call taxi emergency services in August of 17, and that was with 1727. Still involved the very same companies that were in the on-demand rideshare. Then it expanded to the mobility as a service contract in 2019. But that one started to become an overarching contract that involved those very same companies, as well as expanding that to other forms, which is, of course, bicycles, scooters, as well as customer service. As you see there, Spare Labs, which is the software that we utilize for our on-call transit and non-emergency services, they have the ability of providing this as well on a mobility as a service. And so all of this was in an effort, of course, to work on the first to last mile and make sure that we're connecting to all modes of service through these contracts. Now, what we're looking to do is reclassify them and kind of clean things up so they're more in line with where we are today. And part of that is taking 1905, the on-demand service, rideshare services, and making sure that these companies, of course, Via, Spare, and other companies such as Rideco, would have the opportunity of providing the micro transit services, i.e. our GoZone services. Then looking at 1727, the on-call transit services, that area would involve more of the rideshare, ride-hailing services for non-emergency, which would be Ubers, Lyfts, and of course, taxi services. And then taking a look at the 1703 as the connected transit modes. This one is more unique because now it would identify those modes of services that would provide connection to all of our services, our primary services, as well as GoZone related services. And that could be bike share, scooters, customer service, autonomous vehicles if we start to get into that area, as well as car rental if we wanted to say that. But this one would be truly identified as more of a connected service portion. Now, as we get into this, the reclassification gives us an opportunity to, one, we want to extend these contracts because they are actually set to expire at the end of this fiscal year. So the idea is to have them extend out through FY25 into September 25 so that we can take the opportunity to refocus and enhance, of course, the scopes of these work currently being provided to better in line with our current objectives. And then part of that means also reclassifying them, as I shared with you in the previous slide. Now, the idea in that is setting it up for a start in May of this year to audit and rescope them, then taking it to an RFP at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then reviewing them in January for proposals that have been submitted, and then the award in March with them all starting in October of FY26. And with that, any questions?
So my history on this mass of contracts has not been the most clear. And so some of them I know we use, some of them there was trying to become a clearinghouse for interlocal agreements across the whole region, which I don't think focuses on our core. I would hope that we're looking at this with an eye to efficiency, not to creating something that really doesn't need to exist.
And that is exactly our intent. We want to make sure we simplify this so that there isn't any ambiguity and it makes better sense both for the agency and for the public at large.
Okay. As long as we're not carrying something legacy forward because it's something legacy, then I'll be very happy to see this refined. Right.
To that point, obviously we know the importance of the GoZone contract, and that's what we're looking at next fall. But the TNCs, transportation network companies, are the ones that we've leveraged to provide the contracted services to Frisco, as we think about opportunities to expand services to new members of DCTA, that is a lever that gives us a lot of flexibility to build membership at the agency.
Super. All right. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Item 5, local and regional updates and legislative issues. Discussion item. Who's driving that one?
I can start with one, Mr. Chair. I had a phone call with Michael Morris and staff at NCT COG earlier this week, and their approach on Regional Transit 2.0, I think, has evolved a bit. They've had a hard time getting all three of the agencies together at the same time, and so they're beginning to have conversations on a one-off basis with each of the transit agencies. And as DCTA was asked, when would you like to see those meetings happen, and who are the people at the table? And so I think that we can talk some more about having representation from the DCTA board in those conversations, and we could work offline to identify who can attend those meetings.
I think it's incumbent on us to be there. My understanding is that they've got board members and staff members from the other two agencies.
That's correct.
Whereas before, I don't know if that was quite what was panned out, but that's fine. I want equivalent voice.
Correct. Okay. We'll work on that. Thank you.
Got it. All right. If we don't have any other local or regional updates, we'll go ahead and take a look here. We have informational reports in our packet. One is the safety service and ridership report. Any comments on that? We have an update on state legislative and local government relations.
And that is a consent agenda item that'll come up next month for renewal of that contract.
Got it. Of course, Judge E's going down to Austin. I guess the state legislative and local government relations are looking to just be peachy this next session.
It's going to be an interesting session.
Yes. So
based on what happened last session.
Yep. I think everybody can read those tea leaves. They're pretty big. Item 3, update on proposed scope of service and timeline on the A-Train Enhancement Program Management Contract. So we got that as well in the packet. Any questions on that? All right, next up, any future agenda items or board member requests?
Did we, Mr. Chair, did we settle on this, on any additional board meetings, or we're still just looking at May 23rd?
I haven't gotten a firm date yet. I think that's still.
So we can talk that.
Okay.
Yeah, we can talk later.
Okay. Anything else on that? All right, we'll move on to report on items of community interest. Yes, sir.
From May 2nd to May 5th, the Vietnam Wall replication will be in Frisco. The opening ceremony will be May 2nd at 7 p.m. at Grand Park, which is on Cotton Gin Road in Frisco.
Great.
It's going to have motorcycle escorts of over 100 motorcycles.
Yeah,
it's going to be a week-long event. I'm personally on a 2 a.m. to watch the make sure everything happens or people have access to the book. Vietnam Wall is set in the order of the patriots who fell.
Right.
So the alphabetical book has to be maintained.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal. I think we had it in Louisville in 2017, somewhere in that range. 19. COVID, I can't even remember. But it was quite the event then. So I encourage folks, if you haven't had a chance to go experience it, and haven't had a chance to go see it, the full size one in DC, come check this one out. Any other community interest?
I'd like to give a shout out to Chair Gilmore and Paul. Thank y'all for coming up to Commissioner's Court. It was last week. It was a great presentation. Jody and I were just talking about it. It was great. It was such a good story to tell here at DCTA. And it was good
part of our transparency, talking to our partners, and I really appreciate you coming. That was very timely. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Appreciate the court's indulgence on that one. They had good questions and great feedback. So always good to talk with our partners. Other community interest. We got Color Palooza on Saturday. So I want to thank DCTA for participating in that as always. You guys do such a great job of connecting with our partners in our cities. So I expect to see great things out there with the chalk art and everything. And if you get a chance, come on out. It's Saturday. Other than that, we have executive session or?
No, sir, not today.
All right. As there is no other action to be taken on this agenda, we are adjourned. 11:16.
So each of we have